Multiple endings in Spider-Man 2, a first-person mode, and more NPC interaction. Welcome to the Spider-Man 2 Idea Show, where I pick ideas that you guys have on things that you really want to see in the game and talk about them in a video with the intention to inspire the devs and or give inspiration for future add-ons in the game. Comment what you want to see in this game below and you may well be featured in another episode. If you could leave a like on this video, it helps a lot, but if you get to the end and you didn't enjoy the video, then feel free to turn your like into a dislike, but if you could drop a like right now, it helps a ton. So we are going to start off with multiple endings in this game, simply because I think it actually works perfectly. Now, going off the new black and white logo we have for this game on the PlayStation Store, which by the way is back on where I believe it's worldwide as far as I'm aware, so you can now add it to your wish list again, but it's very clear that Peter is going to get the symbiote, or at least that's what the smell of this cover actually gives off. So could the way you act in this game potentially lead to multiple endings based on your behavior with the open world, from ignoring side missions, having an option to respond to an NPC as either polite or rude, and then could that ultimately affect the notoriety that you have in the game? Absolutely, and it's something that I would love to see. Now, I gave an example in a recent video where in another Spider-Man game, there is a random side quest where the symbiote actually grows on you and you have to accept it or get it off. And a system like that would be amazing in this game. Of course, we are speculating that the next sequel, as in Spider-Man 3, would actually have us face Green Goblin, and there's loads of valid reasons as to why that's very likely to happen. So multiple endings which still link to a sequel in some way would actually be great. Now, if we also take replayability into account, which we all want so bad to be improved, then this would actually play a very big role. I can't see any big problems with this, but I could be wrong. Also worth taking into consideration, potential DLCs too, like the Venom one, which people have been speculating about. Next up is first person mode in this game. Now, if you've been watching this channel since the first game, you may recall a video that I did where we basically went into photo mode, and if you zoomed in just enough, you actually had the ability to create a first person effect. Now, a first person mode as a whole in this game, I'm going to assume is a whole different ballgame from a development standpoint. Now, I'm genuinely not sure how long something like that would actually take, as of course in this game you don't drive cars, etc. The only obstacles that I can think of top of my head may be things like interiors, but again, my knowledge is very minimal as far as development would look for something like that. However, the alternative, which I personally would say is still a win, is when we do go into photo mode to simply have a first person option to capture that scene. Now, from the first game, it had a lot of popularity, so fingers crossed that they did actually see how fans did create some great pictures and then decided to go ahead and just make it easier for us to actually capture that moment by giving that first person option in photo mode. I also think from a gameplay standpoint, it would definitely produce some funny moments, like the boat people, if you guys recall in the first game. Questionable without a doubt. Next up is NPC interaction as a whole. Now, for me personally, this actually does affect an open world massively. I think you can have a map that is basically big for nothing and actually have a map so big that it actually feels very small, in the sense of there is no density in the game. Now, the good news is that they did add NPC interaction in the first game, so making the world a lot more immersive was actually something they were/are definitely conscious of. So the first game was on the PlayStation 4, as we know, and because of that, I'm going to say they may have actually came across more console limitations than the guys at Insomniac would have actually probably liked. Again, I could be wrong, though actually seeing what they did in the first game with the open world and the interaction, it's very clear that they were kind of going down a route to make it as immersive as they possibly could. But I guess, again, if you take that into account, it's making sure the game rolled out and things were as smooth as they possibly could be. But as far as NPC interaction goes this time round, I'd love there to be a situation to where you can be walking on the streets and an NPC, for example, runs up requesting your help. At that point, it could be genuine to where they lead you to a crime, or alternatively, like in the GTA games, they actually lead you to the enemies with the intent for the quote-unquote bad guys to actually capture Spider-Man. Now again, as I mentioned earlier, the way you respond to these side quests, I guess we could say affects how you are perceived as Spider-Man in the game. Now also a side note, if that was the situation, that would make the game way more challenging too, as technically, you will actually never know the situation, right? You'll never know if it was genuine or if it was not. But then at the same time, if you take the risk of avoiding an NPC's request for help, it actually could turn out to affect your notoriety in the game, thus leading back to multiple endings. Or maybe just things in general to how NPCs actually respond to you. Like in the first Spider-Man game, people love you, right? People run up to you, they want to take selfies, it's all fun and games. But I really want there to be a situation to where your actions in this game actually does have a knock-on effect to how you're perceived in the game. So let's say, again, you're ignoring these, side quests and the NPCs helps, etc, etc. It's basically, okay, well, Spider-Man really isn't a hero, right? So at that point, people don't want to take selfies with you. Maybe they just genuinely don't like you as a whole, and it actually shows when you're walking on the street to where ultimately you're not welcomed. I think all of these things would undoubtedly make the world as a whole just feel way more immersive, and I think the fact that we have Peter and Miles as well as Venom, I feel like not having something as such would almost be like a missed opportunity. There's loads of different things you can also take into account as far as NPC interaction goes as well, but if you take, everything that I've just mentioned here, from the first person mode, the multiple endings, the NPC interaction, they all simultaneously interlink with each other from a gameplay standpoint to where things are very, very fun. Now don't get me wrong, the first Spider-Man game on PlayStation 4, so we're going back to 2018, was actually very fun. There wasn't an issue with that. But I think the reason why a lot of us are now banking on this game is because, of course, technically, to an extent, you can call it an expansion, you can call it a sequel, but we had Miles Morales in between that first Spider-Man game and where we are now. And of course, like, fluidity in how Miles' actions were in that game was different. But again, if we're still talking about console limitations, etc. as well, then there's that stuff to still, just still take into account. And I think there was an article that I mentioned not too long ago regarding Game Rant, and basically how they said, look, this Spider-Man game has a lot to basically prove, because the first game was so good, you can't just copy and paste it. So when you take the world and the gameplay, that's more or less nailed down as far as how it looks visually and how, the character moves as a whole. So really, in terms of improvements, it is things like I've mentioned just now that will actually make that very small impact or a very big impact. But Venom's voice actor did give us what we needed to hear as far as a sense of how the gameplay will be in this game, especially with Venom. So check the video out that you see on screen right now, because the information in that is just mind-boggling. Wherever your hype level is right now, I can guarantee you, if you haven't heard that information, by the time you do, your hype level will be completely off the charts. Check the video out now on screen.